All right. Good morning. Morning, Dylan. It's
Hello.
good to have you here.
Thank you. Good
Um,
to be here.
Brilliant. So, for all of the schools listening, the purpose of this morning is just to dive in and understand the background when it comes to AstroTurfs. So, from school advisor side, the reason we do this is we sit with so many incredible, amazing suppliers. And we sit with so much information, and every now and again we see there's a trend happening. And what we want to do is help schools so that when they look for quotes, they actually have a better understanding. And that's what school advice is all about. We want to take that burden away from schools when it comes to finding the best suppliers. So literally on school advisor side, you can log in, request a quote, and get quotes from three of the best suppliers. So that's why we've actually got Dylan here from Synsport. So Synsport has been around since the mid 90s.
Mhm.
They are literally, I was looking at some of their reviews now. It's unusual to find a company with so many good reviews. So they've had 18 reviews, and all of them are 4 or 5 stars. And your area of focus is obviously Astro, turfs, netball, soccer, all of
Mm.
that. But what we want to do today is specifically dig into Astro. So,
Okay.
Dylan, welcome. Thank you for being here.
Perfect. Yeah. Thanks for having me.
All right. So, I think first question, and I think this is the most important one in a way. If a school is going to put in an Astro, what are they often unaware of before they start the process? What do they kind of need to know before they even start thinking about it?
Yeah. The most common sort of issue that we find when we present to governing bodies is that they don't, or at least they aren't aware of the fact that they need Western Cape education approvals and they need council approval. Even if a school's privately owned, you're still going to need council approval because the facility itself, if it's a full-size hockey astro or a 3G synthetic sports field to accommodate rugby, soccer, or hockey, you're going to need to tie into the stormwater system, and that ultimately belongs to council. So you'll need those approvals. That approval process can take anywhere between 4 to 8 weeks.
Okay, so it's actually not that long. It's four
Well,
to
yeah,
eight
four,
weeks.
4 to 8 weeks is your most common.
Okay,
We have had situations where schools, the approval process has taken close to 3 months.
wow.
Yeah,
Okay,
because there are complications with
okay,
the land rights, zoning of land, how we're tying into the stormwater. So there's a bit of back and forth between council. But generally, when we sort of start the process for the governing bodies, we try and encourage them to start the Western Cape education approvals and the council approvals in the background, so that
okay.
we can carry on with the design of the facility and firm up
Well, they
the
get it.
quotation while that is all being approved.
Okay, all right. So then on that, that's obviously one of the first steps. What is the first step when planning an AstroTurf?
Yeah, look, ultimately the first step is to try and determine what sports you want to accommodate on the surface. So to give you an example, there's typically, if you're talking about full size synthetic sports facilities, you would talk about a hockey astro, which is a dedicated hockey facility. Secondly, you would talk about a 3G synthetic sports field, which is a longer pile height. It's normally about a sort of 40 or 50 mil pile height, comes with a silica sand and rubber infill. You would typically play rugby, soccer, and hockey on that type of surface. So the school needs to determine what sports do they want to accommodate. Then secondly, they need to have some sort of budget, because ultimately the budget is going to dictate the size of the facility and the finishes of the facility.
Yes.
Are there going to be floodlights? What kind of fencing system are you going to have? Are you going to have spectator stands? Are you going to have player dugouts? So yeah,
So you're kind of saying when they're looking at a budget, not only are they looking for the Astro, they're actually looking for all the trimmings, the lights, the
100%.
stands.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, to put it into
Um,
perspective, an entry level sort of off the shelf hockey astro can cost in the region of about 4.5 to 5 million. So once you start adding all the trimmings, it can go up to about 8 million.
wow.
So the school
Okay.
needs to sort of just have a ballpark figure, because it helps us, because when we're consulting with our engineer, he's busy designing a facility, and if we've got a budget to work within, that will determine the design of the facility at the end of the day.
Okay. Brilliant. Okay, thank you. Just on that note, for any of the schools, you are welcome. While Dylan is here, you can post questions. So on your screen on the right, you should be able to post questions. It might just ask you to log into YouTube, which takes about a minute. So if you have any questions, please let us know. All right. So Dylan, next question then. I think one of the things schools get quite confused about is the different roles of the different people. So if we could just look at the role of the engineer.
Okay.
Why an engineer? What do they do?
So typically when you're building a full-size sports facility, we always say to the governing bodies, the process starts and finishes with the engineer. Ultimately, we would attend the initial brief and then the school will sort of tell us what their goal is and what they want to achieve with the facility. We will then go to the engineer and he will start his work. Sort of the first step is obviously your survey work. We would need to do surveys on the area. Based on the survey results, we will then do a design of the facility. We'll present that design to the school. They will approve that design. Then based on that, the engineer will survey the work. He'll inspect the work to make sure that it's being built according to his design. And then ultimately he signs off on that work. The professional engineers have got professional indemnity. So they sign off and the school is then protected.
On that note, I think one of the things schools obviously have a lot of parents. Every parent wants to help out with the school. The school is most probably sitting with a couple of engineers somewhere along the line. Should the school be using one of the parents that are an engineer, or is this fraught with problems?
Yeah, look, in our 25 years of building these facilities, we've encountered this situation many times. Often there's an engineer on the governing body or there's an engineer who's a parent at the school. They offer to handle the works at a reduced rate. The risk is you get different types of engineers. So typically for a sports field, you would make use of a civil or a structural engineer. Now you've got a parent who might be a mechanical engineer. He's not used to the typical approval process. He doesn't understand the types of documents that need to be submitted as part of that approval process, and it can delay the ultimate approval.
Yes.
We recently did a project in the northern suburbs in Cape Town. The school decided to use their own engineer, and to put it into perspective, there was about a 3-month delay on when the school wanted to start versus when the project started. And that delay was caused largely as a result of the parent who was an engineer and him not knowing the process that needed to be followed.
So would I be correct in saying unless the engineer has specific experience to Astros, it should be a no-no?
Yeah, I would try and persuade the school to steer away as much as possible.
Okay.
I do understand that the school would be tempted to go that route because there's a significant saving. But once again, if the school is under pressure to get that facility in, there can be lengthy delays as a result of you using that parent.
Okay. All right. No, that makes a lot of sense. You mentioned something else. You just mentioned kind of survey samples. Am I correct in saying that all survey samples need to be done before anything gets built?
Absolutely.
What do those survey samples include? What are you looking for? What should schools be thinking about if they're looking at a piece of land going, okay, we want to put an Astro in?
Yeah, so to put it into perspective, so once we have received a letter of intent or at least a letter of appointment from the school, we would then do a geotech survey. So the geotech survey would involve us digging 5 or 6 sort of trial holes around the field in sort of different parts of the field. Those trial holes will normally be dug to a depth of anywhere between 450 to 600 millimeters in depth, and that'll enable us to understand the soil composition. So it'll help us to see the different layers. Okay. So we'll be able to see, okay, cool, we are encountering clay at 200 millimeters of depth. That clay is going to be a bit of a concern because it might hamper the field's ability to drain. So we need to allow for stabilization of that clay. The soil composition also helps us to understand what levels of compaction are required. The second survey is a topographical survey. That's a sort of an aerial survey. Helps us to understand or to at least see the high and the low points of the proposed area, and that'll determine the cut to full ratios for the project. and that data ultimately determines the bill of quantities that we then price.
Okay. Yes. And just on that, literally, can you literally take any, if a school has an open piece of land, can you literally take any piece of land and use it? Or is there anything that will actually hinder you from using the piece of land? Because it sounds like if you are taking these samples, you can work with anything. Is that the case?
Yeah, look, generally we can design it's called a layerworks design. So typically you would be able to put together a layerworks design and a field design using pretty much any piece of land. The only sort of issues that will hamper you being able to use that land is if there's a hard stone layer present, or if there's a water aquifer
Okay.
under the field, but that will be able to determine once we've done the surveys.
Okay. And from if you are quoting the school, do you need to do those surveys first, or is that what is the kind of the quote process? Because I'm guessing you can't just go quote on day one, walk around. There's a lot of work that needs to be done before you can give a proper quote.
Yeah.
How does that process work?
So typically at the start, once we've attended the first governing body brief, we would then present an estimate quote. That estimate quote would be based on our 25 years of experience, and it would be very much a sort of off-the-shelf design. Built into that quote would be a 5% contingency. That contingency is twofold. It looks to deal with your foreign exchange fluctuation and your imported components, which are your turf and shock pad, but then it also looks to deal with your mass earthwork variables on your construction elements.
Okay.
So once that estimate quote has been sort of approved and we've received that letter of intent, then we will go and carry out the proper surveys.
Okay.
Once the survey has been carried out, we'll do the bill of quantities, and then if there is a variable, that contingency will look to absorb that variable.
Okay, all right. Well, then on that note, let's talk price. Maybe just to take it from a different angle. From your experience, generally, how are schools affording it? You're talking about 4 to 8 million. What are the options available for schools when it comes to raising the funding and paying for it?
Yeah, so typically there's a few scenarios that the schools would use. I mean, firstly, they would, and these are generally scenarios that are discussed with us. We tend to sort of hear the governing body talk about it. The option A would be to increase the school fees of each child anywhere between 50 and 200 Rand a month over a specified period. That could be a year, it could be 2 years, it could be 3 years. Different fundraising initiatives. So you've got your golf days, you've got your raffles, you've got your auctions.
Yes.
So all of those sort of initiatives. And then commonly the schools will sell advertising space around the field. So once the field's built, they'll sell advertising. And I know the advertising rates are going at anywhere between sort of 5,500 to 7,500 Rand per year to have a board up.
Okay. And realistically, how many boards could you put in, advertising wise? Is it 10 or 5?
Yeah, your sort of standard boards are 2 meters in length and 900 millimeters in height.
Okay.
So yeah, you could probably fit 100 to 150 boards. I mean, your one length of your field alone is 100 meters. Your two sides of the field are 55 meters. Then the other side, minus your player dugout, you're looking at probably 80 meters.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's actually a viable option to raise some of the funding from advertising over a couple of years.
Correct.
And how open are the banks when it comes to loans?
Yeah, look, I mean, it's a tricky one for me to answer because we don't really get too involved with that side. But look, ultimately, the school's balance sheet is going to determine their ability to get finance. The bank's going to look at whether the school's in a healthy financial position or not. Are they showing a profit? And if they are, they'll be more likely to secure funding.
Okay. And maybe just so I can get a better idea of, and the schools can get a better idea of timing. So if a school comes to you tomorrow and says, we would like an Astro, could you just give me a rough idea of timing to prepare quotes, timing then once the quote's approved to get to a point where you actually construct, and then how long does construction roughly take? And let's take an AstroTurf as the example.
Yeah. So our sort of typical dealings with the school, because there's always a little bit of back and forth from that initial brief to when you sort of finalize the design, because often schools will start out with a very basic design, and then over time they'll decide to add floodlights on, and they'll decide to add a player dugout on, and all of those sort of facilities also sort of contribute to how popular the facility is going to be, because a lot of schools are also looking to hire out their facilities. So you use a hockey Astro, for example, they would hire that facility out to schools in the area that maybe don't have hockey Astros. So they sell time on the field. So schools will rent the field for 2 to 3 hours a day, and they'll also rent the field out to clubs in the area. So now all of a sudden you've got more foot traffic on that field, and now all of a sudden you're offering more value to your companies that are advertising on the field itself. So the general sort of consultation process can take anywhere between sort of 4 to 6 weeks for the school. That's a bit of back and forth. I'll obviously do a few presentations with the governing body. Then once we've sort of firmed up our offer and the governing body's accepted the offer, then our engineer gets involved, and that's when the sort of permitting and approval process starts. As mentioned, that can take anywhere between 4 and 8 weeks. So let's call that 2 months now from start. And then construction process in a hockey Astro is typically 3 to 3.5 months.
Okay, all right.
Yeah. So call it 5 to 5.5 months from the start of discussions to completion.
Okay, so it takes a bit of time, but not that bad. I think from my side, definitely, and I think this might be my last question. One of the things you have to count before you even think about building is that there is actually a long-term cost involved with an AstroTurf. I think sometimes that's something that we don't always immediately think about. Could you give us just an idea of what are the long-term maintenance costs? How can the school think about them? Just kind of tips so that the schools are aware and what they need to be planning for.
Okay, so typically when we build a full-size synthetic sports field, whether it's a dedicated Astro or a 3G facility, we would sell the maintenance equipment as part of, or we would offer the maintenance equipment, which sort of involves a ride-on tractor with a drag brush, and it also includes a rotary brush. So we would sell the equipment to the school, generally costs in the region of 90 to 100,000 rand for that equipment. They can then carry out weekly and monthly maintenance in-house. Alternatively, if the schools can't afford the maintenance equipment at that time, we would offer them a maintenance package. So we would come around once a month, once a quarter, twice a year. We would typically charge anywhere between 4,500 to 7,000 rand per visit, depending on the location of the school and whether there's extensive travel required. And once again, the school would then decide how often they sort of expect us to come for those visits. We generally encourage the schools to try and carry out basic maintenance on the facility at least once a week. Your sports coaches are going to be on the facility, and they'll be able to see where there's wear and tear. Your high traffic areas like your penalty spots, your short corner spots, your center circles, those will always tend to wear out quicker. And on a hockey field, for example, you always want to be brushing that sand back into place. So you're going to get that dispersion of sand. For example, on a hockey penalty spot, you're going to get that sand dispersing forward. You want to be brushing that sand back into place, even if it's by means of using a hard bristle broom and a little bit of elbow grease. Brush that sand back into place, because if that sand is not brushed into place, over time, the yarn and the strength of that yarn is compromised, and that creates a weak point in the field, and those areas then wear through quicker.
Okay, so realistically, schools can very easily do the management themselves. Correct. Bit of elbow grease if they have the right tools, otherwise they can outsource. Just and sorry, one other question. The surface, the actual Astro surface, does that ever need to be replaced in the future?
That's a good question. Yeah, I was thinking about this now while I was chatting to you. So typically when we install a synthetic sports field, it ultimately comes with a shock pad and then obviously your turf on top. Our shock pad is imported from Germany, comes with a 25-year guarantee. It's the best performing shock pad on the market and offers the best performance in terms of drainage. and obviously shock absorption properties.
So that sits below the
Correct, it sits
grass.
below the turf.
Okay.
So you're looking at it, we give a sort of standard 25-year guarantee. I've got supporting documents from a supplier in Germany stating that if installed correctly, they will give us a 25-year guarantee. So effectively, the school's going to get 2 to 3 life cycles out of that shock pad. The turf component comes with a sort of standard supplier guarantee of 8 years.
Okay.
Most of our fields that we've built are exceeding that guarantee period. A lot of our fields at the moment are sort of reaching 10 years. Most recently, we've had fields reaching 12 and 13 years.
Okay.
So the fields are sort of outperforming the guarantee period given by the manufacturer by 5 years. So it's important for the school to know, because when you're adjudicating quotes at governing body level, because a lot of schools nowadays get 2 or 3 quotes because it forms part of the sort of governing body process. It's very important when you adjudicate those quotes not to only adjudicate on price alone. Yes. There's a lot of factors to take into account, and turf and shock pad is arguably the most important, because that's what everybody sees. Yes. Everybody doesn't know. Not everybody really can see the layer works and can see the drainage, but they see the turf and shock pad, and that's also what gives the field itself its sort of performance characteristics. Your players will quickly be able to distinguish between a poor performing shock pad and turf versus a good quality shock pad and turf. So yeah, in terms of guarantees at the moment, we feel confident to offer the schools a 10 to 12-year guarantee on the turf component, subject to the field being maintained properly. We can quickly see if the field hasn't been maintained properly. One other thing I forgot to mention earlier, so typically when we sell a full-size sports field, we offer a 5-year maintenance plan built into the project cost. That maintenance plan sees us coming around once a year. And we do a full inspection of the facility. We do a full deep clean of the facility and a full maintenance run.
Okay. So I'm thinking that's an important thing for schools. There's a lot that they can maintain themselves, but ultimately they do want the experts coming in.
Correct.
And then just to summarize, realistically, your shock pad, you're looking at every 25 years replacing, and then your turf on top, you're looking at 12 years.
Yeah, so minimum manufacturer's guarantee of 8 years, but over the track record that we've built up, our fields are exceeding 10 years comfortably. A lot of the fields we've just resurfaced now recently are all 12, 13 years. Rose University, 14 years. So we're building up a track record of having a turf that is outperforming its guarantee period. Something else for the governing body members and principals to also consider is a lot of the competitors in the market are offering 8 to 10 year guarantees, but these competitors have only been around for 2 or 3 years. So none of their fields have actually achieved minimum guarantee. So often we try and encourage the schools to scrutinize that sort of selling point.
Yes.
If company B is offering a guarantee of 8 years or 10 years, challenge him. Find out what facilities have you built that have lasted 8 years or exceeded that period. We can present a list of 30 to 40 schools around the country that have outlasted their guarantee period.
So I think that's a great tip for the schools. If you are gonna put in an Astro and you are choosing a company, make sure that you actually go to some of their schools that they've done, and specifically then I would recommend go ask to see an Astro that is 8 years old. So make sure that you don't ask just to see the nice new fresh one.
Correct.
Go look at the other one, because I think that's a great way for you as a school to be able to determine quality. Because I think at the end of the day, if you are going to be spending 4 to 8 million on an Astro, it makes sense to ensure that you get getting the quality. And the easiest way to check that is to go to other schools.
Correct.
Awesome, Dylan. I think that's all we have really time for. I suppose the last thing is you've given us a lot of time, so I think it would be fair to say I can give you 30 seconds to literally pitch Synsport. So Dylan's company is Synsport. They're very well rated on School Advisor. Why would you say to schools that if they are looking for quotes, that you are one of the top places to go to?
Yeah, so just a quick sort of brief history of who we are and what we do. The company was founded in 1994. We were the first company to install a synthetic sports field in South Africa. Since then, We've grown. We now sort of handle sports surfacing across the full spectrum. So everything from hockey fields to 3D sports fields. We build tennis courts. We build athletics tracks. We do gym flooring. So we offer the full spectrum. We've got an in-house steel engineering department, in-house carpentry departments. We fabricate all the fencing systems in-house, all the sort of ancillary items like spectator seating, storage boxes for the player dugouts. We do everything in-house. So a lot of our competition subcontracts a lot of that work. The risk with clients when you're dealing with a lot of subcontractors is subcontractors are always pointing fingers. With us, you can deal with one company. We handle the full spectrum of work. Branches in Cape Town, Knysna, and Johannesburg. I've got a total of 13 teams around the country. So yeah, we can handle multiple projects at one time all over the country.
Cool. And last example, one recent school that you've done? Who have you done recently?
Stellenbosch High School around the corner. We built a beautiful hockey Astro there. And at present, we are busy with 6 large-scale projects all around the country. 3 in Cape Town, 2 in Johannesburg, 1 in PE, and 1 in Kimberley.
Awesome. Brilliant. Dylan, thank you to the schools. Thank you for your time. You'll see there is a link in the comments field. So if you'd like to check out some of the reviews on Synsport, please do. But just in summary, we from school advisor side, we can definitely see the trend with Astros. A lot of schools are putting them in. And I think just if you can look at some of this background information, it can really help you. And I think from my side, I think my strongest recommendation is go check out old Astros from companies. I think that's one of the best tips. So if someone's going to pitch to you, go check out the old Astros. We'll keep you updated for more webinars. We'll keep you updated with other events that are happening. If any of you are in the IT space at your school, we have an event in Cape Town next week, Friday, and we've got some events early next year where you'll be able to connect with companies that do a range of stuff. So thank you for your time. We'll also send you an email with the link to the video so that you can watch it again if you'd like to, or share with others. Dylan, thank you so much.
Excellent. Yeah,
we appreciate
thank you for having me.
Cool.
Cheerio.
Thank you, schools.